January 6, 2023 started like any other day at Richneck Elementary. Kids arrived with backpacks. Teachers prepared lessons. Parents dropped off their children, trusting they'd be safe. Abigail Zwerner stood in front of her first-grade classroom, teaching children who were barely 6 and 7 years old. She had no idea that within hours her life would be forever altered. The security footage shows normal hallway traffic. Students walking in lines. Teachers guiding their classes. Everything appears routine, calm, ordinary. Then, at approximately 2 p.m., a sound cuts through the afternoon quiet. A gunshot. Not from outside. Not from a distance. From inside a first-grade classroom. What happens next unfolds in real time on the security cameras. Staff members sprint down hallways. Radios crackle with urgent voices. Classroom doors slam shut as teachers follow lockdown procedures. One school staff member rushes towards Zwerner's classroom. She reaches the door and pushes it open. What she sees stops her cold. Later, speaking to police officers whose body cameras are recording, this staff member describes the moment. As soon as he shot it, I heard it and went in. Abby was bloody. Think about that for a second. A teacher, doing her job, teaching reading or math to first graders, suddenly bleeding from a gunshot wound. And the person holding the gun? One of her own students. A child who should have been learning his ABCs, not how to pull a trigger. The security footage now shows law enforcement arriving. Police cars pull up to the school entrance. Officers rush through the front doors, hands on their weapons, not knowing what they're walking into. Body camera footage captures their perspective. Hallways filled with frightened staff. Classrooms on lockdown. Children's voices asking what's happening. And somewhere inside, a teacher fighting for her life. Emergency medical technicians arrive within minutes. Their body cameras show them racing through the school with medical equipment. They're directed to the front office, where staff members have brought Zwerner. The footage from the office is difficult to watch. Zwerner sits in a chair, blood visible on her clothing. EMTs immediately begin assessing her injuries. They work quickly, efficiently, knowing every second counts. One medic asks where she's hurt. Zwerner, despite her pain, despite the shock, manages to respond. She points to her hand. She indicates her chest. The bullet went through both. Within minutes they have her on a stretcher. The body camera footage follows as they rush her through the school's hallways, out the front doors, toward the waiting ambulance. But here's where something remarkable happens. Something that shows you exactly who Abigail Zwerner is as a person. The ambulance doors close. EMTs work around Zwerner, starting IVs, checking vital signs, preparing for the race to the hospital. The body camera footage continues recording. Zwerner lies on the stretcher, injured, traumatized, having just been shot by a 6-year-old student. And in this moment, she makes an unusual request. Can you tell me a story? She asks the EMTs. Not, am I going to die? Not, how bad is it? Not screaming or panicking. She asked for a story. A distraction from the pain, from the reality of what just happened. This small moment reveals everything about who Abigail Zwerner is. Even in her darkest hour, even bleeding and frightened, she remains composed. She seeks comfort not through medication alone, but through human connection. Through narrative. Through the same thing she'd been doing all day in her classroom, engaging with stories. The EMTs, professional and caring, talk to her during the ride. They keep her conscious, alert, focused on anything except the bullet lodged inside her body. Because yes, there's a bullet inside Abigail Zwerner. And years later, it's still there. At the hospital, trauma surgeons take over. They assess the damage. They run tests. They make a decision that might surprise you. Doctor, surgeon's name, who would later testify in court about Zwerner's injuries, explained the wound in stark terms. This is much more similar to a war injury than it is what I normally see. A war injury. That's what a trauma surgeon called the wound inflicted by a 6-year-old child in a first-grade classroom. The bullet's path was devastating. It entered through Zwerner's hand, likely raised defensively when she saw the gun, then continued through into her chest. The trajectory took it dangerously close to her heart. Inches. Maybe less. But here's the medical reality that Zwerner now lives with. The bullet remains inside her body. It's still there today. Why haven't surgeons removed it? The doctor explained, for something like this, it is actually way more dangerous to remove the bullet than it is to leave it in place. The bullet sits embedded near vital structures. Attempting to extract it could cause more damage than leaving it alone. So Abigail Zwerner carries a permanent reminder of January 6, 2023, inside her own body. A piece of metal that traveled through a gun brought to school by a first grader. a constant physical presence of trauma. But the physical injury, as terrible as it is, represents only part of Zwerner's suffering. The psychological wounds cut even deeper. Now we need to rewind. Back before the shooting. Back to the hours and days leading up to that moment when a 6-year-old pulled a trigger in a first-grade classroom. Because this is where the story becomes not just tragic, but infuriating. The security footage released during Zwerner's civil trial shows something disturbing. Not the shooting itself, but what happened before. The footage shows an office. A desk. A woman sitting at that desk working through her day. This is Ebony Parker, the school's former assistant principal. And according to the lawsuit filed by Abigail Zwerner, Parker ignored multiple warnings that a student had brought a gun to school that day. Multiple warnings. Not one. Not a vague concern. Multiple specific reports that a first grader had a weapon. Let that sink in for a moment. Before Abigail Zwerner was shot, people knew. Staff members had seen things. Heard things. They reported their concerns through proper channels. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. And nothing happened. The civil trial, which resulted in the public release of all this footage, centers on this question. Did Ebony Parker ignore warnings that could have prevented the shooting? Zwerner's lawsuit accuses Parker of gross negligence. Of receiving multiple reports about the gun and failing to act. Of prioritizing policy over safety. Of following protocol instead of protecting a teacher and students. What were these warnings? According to testimony, staff members approached Parker with concerns about this particular student on the very day of the shooting. They reported behavioral issues. They reported that other students claimed he had a gun. They reported enough information that any reasonable person would investigate immediately. But Parker, according to the defense attorneys representing her, was following proper protocol. She couldn't search the student without parental permission. She needed to wait for the child's mother to arrive. Protocol. Procedure. Policy. These words would be repeated throughout the trial. The defense argued that Parker did everything by the book. That hindsight makes things look different. That in the moment she made reasonable decisions based on the information available. But here's the question that haunts this case. At what point does following protocol become an excuse for inaction? At what point should human judgment override official policy? At what point do you say, I don't care what the handbook says, we need to act right now? Because while Ebony Parker sat at her desk, while procedures were being followed, while everyone waited for a parent to arrive, a 6-year-old child walked through the school with a loaded 9mm handgun in his backpack. Think about the logistics of that. A handgun isn't small. It's heavy. It's metal. A 6-year-old carrying it would struggle with the weight. How did he get it to school? How did he hide it? How did he access it during class? These questions point to a larger failure. Not just of the school, but of systems designed to prevent exactly this situation. The gun belonged to the child's mother. It was her weapon, registered to her, kept in her home. Somehow her 6-year-old son got access to it. Somehow he understood how to load it. Somehow he knew how to take off the safety and pull the trigger. Where was the gun safe? Where was the trigger lock? Where were the basic safety measures that any responsible gun owner should have in place, especially with a young child in the home? These failures compound. A parent fails to secure a weapon. A child brings it to school. Staff members notice and report it. An administrator follows protocol instead of acting decisively. And a teacher pays the price. 2 years after the shooting, Abigail Zwerner sat down with Savannah Guthrie for an interview. The security footage and body camera video hadn't been released yet. The trial was still in the future. But Zwerner was ready to talk about what she'd been through. She spoke about her injuries, about the physical recovery. About surgeries and rehabilitation and learning to live with a bullet permanently lodged near her heart. But then she said something that reveals the deeper wound. It's been helpful now that they've scarred over. It's still a reminder that, hey, this happened to you. This is what your body has been through. The scars have healed. But they remain as reminders. Permanent markers on her skin that say, this happened. This is real. This changed you forever. During the trial, Zwerner's sister Hannah took the stand. Her testimony painted a picture of how profoundly the shooting altered Abigail's life. It's very hard to get her to go out and do things, Hannah testified. And if she does, someone has to be with her. She's really afraid of being alone. This is what trauma does. It doesn't just injure the body. It rewires the brain. It changes how you interact with the world. It makes you afraid of things that never frightened you before. Abigail Zwerner was a first-grade teacher. Her job required confidence, energy, independence. She managed a classroom of young children. She made decisions. She handled challenges. She stood in front of 20 small humans every day and taught them, guided them, kept them safe. Now she's afraid to be alone. The defense attorneys attempted to challenge this testimony. They brought up the fact that months after the shooting, Abigail and Hannah attended a Taylor Swift concert together. And your sister was able to do that, the defense attorney pointed out, implying that if Zwerner could attend a concert, she couldn't be as traumatized as claimed. Hannah's response cut through that argument immediately. Yes, but it was not without its challenges. This exchange highlights a fundamental misunderstanding about trauma. People think recovery is binary. Either you're traumatized and can't function, or you're fine and can do everything you used to do. But trauma doesn't work that way. You can attend a concert and still be terrified of being alone. You can smile for photos and still carry wounds that never fully heal. You can appear functional while fighting invisible battles every single day. Abigail Zwerner went to a Taylor Swift concert with her sister. She probably sang along to songs. Maybe she even danced. And all the while she carried a bullet inside her chest. A permanent reminder. A physical manifestation of the worst day of her life. The lawsuit seeks damages for medical expenses, for pain and suffering, for lost wages, for the future Abigail Zwerner lost on January 6, 2023. Because she's not teaching anymore. She can't return to the classroom. The place she loved, the job she was passionate about, the career she'd chosen, all gone. Taken by a single bullet fired by a 6-year-old child. And here's what makes this case even more heartbreaking. Zwerner didn't just lose her career. She lost her purpose. She lost her identity. She lost the version of herself that could stand in front of a classroom without fear. Chapter 5. The Bigger Questions, 2400 Hours, 28:00. The Richneck Elementary shooting forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Questions that don't have easy answers. Questions that reveal failures at multiple levels. How does a 6-year-old get access to a loaded gun? This isn't about Second Amendment rights or gun control debates. This is about basic safety. If you own a weapon and you have young children, that weapon needs to be secured. Locked. Inaccessible. There's no gray area here. The child's mother faced legal consequences. She was charged and prosecuted. But prosecuting a parent after the fact doesn't undo what happened. It doesn't remove the bullet from Abigail Zwerner's chest. It doesn't restore her sense of safety. What about the school's responsibility? The defense argues that Ebony Parker followed protocol. But maybe that's exactly the problem. Maybe the protocols are wrong. Maybe waiting for parental permission before searching a child suspected of having a gun is a policy that needs to change. Think about the position Parker was in. If she searched the child without permission and found nothing, she could face consequences. Parents could complain. She could be accused of overreach, of violating policies, of not following proper procedures. But if she doesn't search and something happens, well, that's what we're talking about now. This is the impossible position educators find themselves in. Damned if they do, damned if they don't. Expected to keep children safe while also following policies that might prevent them from taking decisive action. Should schools have metal detectors? Should backpacks be searched daily? Should we treat elementary schools like airports, with security screenings and strict protocols? These questions reveal how far we've fallen. We're debating whether first graders should walk through metal detectors. We're discussing security measures for 6-year-olds. We're treating elementary schools like potential war zones. And maybe they are. When a trauma surgeon describes a teacher's injury as similar to what he'd see in combat, when we have active shooter drills for kindergartners, when we need security footage and body cameras to piece together what happened in a first-grade classroom, maybe we've already acknowledged that schools have become battlegrounds. But they shouldn't be. Children should be able to learn without fear. Teachers should be able to teach without wondering if they'll be shot by their own students. Parents should be able to drop their kids off at school without worrying about security footage and body camera video. The Richneck Elementary shooting isn't unique because it happened. It's unique because of who pulled the trigger. 6 years old. First grade. Still learning to read. Old enough to operate a 9mm handgun. The security footage and body camera video from January 6, 2023, tell a story that's hard to process. They show systems failing. They show warning signs ignored. They show a teacher injured and traumatized. They show first responders racing to save a life. They show a 6-year-old child who somehow had access to a loaded weapon. As of the latest reports, the civil trial continues. Abigail Zwerner seeks justice, compensation, and acknowledgement that what happened to her could have been prevented. That multiple people knew. That warnings were given. That protocol failed her. Ebony Parker's defense maintains that she followed proper procedures. That hindsight clarity shouldn't condemn decisions made in the moment. That the real failure occurred long before anyone reported concerns to her. It occurred when a child gained access to a weapon. The truth probably lies somewhere in the complexity of it all. Multiple failures. Multiple people who could have done something different. Multiple moments where a different choice might have changed everything. But here's what we know for certain. Abigail Zwerner went to work on January 6, 2023, to teach first graders. She did her job. She showed up. She taught children who were just beginning their educational journey. And she was shot for it. She carries that bullet still. In her body. In her memory. In her changed life. She carries the weight of what happened and the knowledge that it didn't have to happen. The footage has been released. The trial continues. The debates about school safety, gun access, and administrative protocols will go on. But for Abigail Zwerner, January 6, 2023, will always be the day everything changed. The day a first grader brought a gun to school. The day warnings were ignored. The day she learned that doing your job, teaching children, standing in front of a classroom, can cost you everything. And that's a truth that no amount of security footage, body camera video, or courtroom testimony can change. This case continues to raise difficult questions about school safety and accountability. What are your thoughts on how this was handled? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth updates and true stories like this one.